So let's have a seat, everyone. Thank you. And we'll go to the next slide. So if we can have a seat, thank you. They could probably turn the temperature up a little bit. Are people chilly? Yeah. I mean, I'm very comfortable, but I radiate heat like a dog. I'm like 3 dog night. I'm like 3 75-pound dogs. I love dogs, but it may turn it up a little bit. I know if I'm comfortable, everybody else is cold, but not real high. I don't know what it's set at, but you can just warm it up a little bit. By the way, optimal glucose utilization by the brain is at 68 degrees. So for a lecture hall, no, 68. So skinny chicks, I know don't like that, but was that Skinny Girl, that drink that my son-in-law used to represent that company, branding them? Skinny Girl. That's some mixer, I don't know what it is. So is that first hour and a half kind of a good summary of all that? You kind of get your head around it. So now we're going to take another big step up here. And many of you have seen this, but I want to go through it just as a review as we begin to talk about the contact and consciousness that happens during 𝗖𝗍𝗃. And again, if you can, please turn off your phones and alarms and what have you. Everybody knows the basic states of consciousness: waking, sleeping, dreaming. And of course, that includes lucid dreams and precognition. We've talked about that. And then the meditative state when you reach samadhi, unbounded, pure consciousness. And those are the 4. Can we have, is everybody seated? I have, what time do you have? I have 4:10, so we're T plus 5 minutes. I try to be punctual. Emergency doctors, only doctors have to be on time because you're dead in 5 minutes. You're brain dead. All the others can be late to an hour and a half. We always laugh about that. Not a field for a slacker. So when you consider that, we go through this every day. We wake up, we go to sleep. Frequently we dream. If we're lucky, we can train to have, as I said last night, a lucid dream where you're awake in the dream and can explore the cosmos, right? And then in meditation, when you're awake in meditation doing the process, but when you reach that point, and it may happen just very effortlessly and spontaneously, where you're just awake, but you're not aware of anything, it's just that quiet, pure awake state. The awake, aware state, just that. The mind is pure, empty of all distractions, thoughts, perceptions, even self. And you're in this sort of pure state of being awake without any boundaries. That's samadhi. And it can come very subtly, and then it can be very traumatic, sort of peak experience also. But it grows and unfolds as you meditate more and more, because the meditative process, remember this, I don't care what technique you use, I teach you several. All meditation techniques should have as their goal the technique ending and you being delivered your individuality into this state of the unbounded. So the drop becomes the ocean. If you get tied up and you're just doing the technique, then you've forgotten. It's like you're driving in your car to go to the store. You get to the store and you stay in your car. So in meditation, if you're meditating, the point of the meditative state is to go deeper and deeper into quiet mind until you're in this state of pure consciousness, or at least something close to it, where you can begin to open up in that deep meditative state, like the hypnagogic and lucid dream state, where you can remote view. and see various places. And all that is within the nature of conscious experiences, the experience of pure state of consciousness. Now, these ordinary states of consciousness, I call them ordinary, including samadhi. Once you begin to experience enough of that depth of quiet consciousness, these other aspects begin to unfold spontaneously. And while these are listed in a linear way, there's actually this interplay where they begin to unfold sort of in a back and forth iterative way as you get established further and further into higher states of consciousness. Cosmic consciousness is simply when you're listening right now and simultaneously you're experiencing that clear field of consciousness that is unbounded nothingness at the same time. Simultaneously, seamlessly, without intellectualization, it's just experience. And that begins to come more and more as you experience the meditative state, deep, perhaps periods of samadhi, and then as you come out of meditation, you're doing things, and you realize you're still connected to that deep, quiet state of consciousness. Okay? And when that gets established permanently, it's there all the time. It's actually there when you're waking, dreaming, and sleeping. All right? That's called cosmic consciousness, because you're in touch with that unbounded cosmic field of consciousness as an experience, not an intellectualization, while you're doing everything, waking, dreaming, sleeping. Now, as that begins to unfold and get established, and there's no time period for this, and some people might have it happen in an hour when they drop dead, like I did, and some people may have it take a lifetime or this lifetime and other worlds beyond. Doesn't matter. I love the saying from the mystic tradition, talking about these higher states of consciousness, all the way to God consciousness, unity consciousness, Brahman consciousness. We'll go into this. To each and every one of them, you will, no doubt, attain. Everyone, every soul will attain all of them. Now, when? That's up to you. Ironically, you're the master of your own ship, although we like to play the victim. But in reality, we have the key to our own soul. And we often, if we're in a little bird cage, so we're not developing this way, we put ourselves in the cage and we have to unlock it and go out. So just know that these states are all folded within the reality of every higher intelligent life form, including humans, Homo sapiens. And so that's a really hopeful and beautiful thing to contemplate, that it's actually operative there. It's there in its potentiality, but the individual experience of it takes this kind of training and discipline and meditation and understanding, the knowledge, so that when you have that experience, you know from whence it came and why it's happening, which is why I want to go into this. And now, once that happens, you begin to have experiences of what's been termed in the mystic literature as God consciousness, where you're experiencing the creator state, the great, like that most great light, but it's an active manifestation of this unbounded conscious field all the time. Now, the way that grows, you begin to perceive, it's quite beautiful, even visually, auditory, what's called celestial perception. And what that is that as you're, and literally there are studies with meditation subjects, when you're meditating, the neuroscience has shown that there are increased axonal connections between the neurons. And as these grow, eventually through meditative states and higher state of consciousness, it literally affects even your perceptual abilities. This is why some people see auras. Some people will see the light within a plant. Some people will hear other dimensions. Some people will have this clairvoyance and what have you. But all those 8 capabilities in the Vedas are known as siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S, these various empowers that unfold. But they're all part and parcel of experiencing this profound, deep level of consciousness, and then it becomes applied in your life. And so you begin to be able to see and experience this, and you begin to have more of these experiences of seeing beings from these other dimensions. And when it gets to the point that you actually have this profound experience of that, the most great light, the creator state being, as opposed to this unbounded absolute field of consciousness in your awareness, then and that's all the time, where you're awake, dreaming, or sleeping. That's when you're established in God consciousness. Now, that unfolds in an iterative back and forth process where glimpses of it happen as you're developing cosmic consciousness. But, again, this is a linear list of something that's unfolding very holographically, very multiphasic. Then, as that gets more established, and the glimpses of this can happen at any point in this procession, let's say, of the individual development of their consciousness and soul, you begin to see that everything is consciousness itself, sort of phasing as that thing. So you actually sense that this podium and the lights and the room is pure consciousness simultaneously as what it is. So you're now experiencing, now that is a very abstract experience. It's frequently you have to have someone who understands it, that when you have it, will say, yes, that's what this is. But it's the experience of it is that you're aware, not only are you, in cosmic consciousness, you're aware of the unbounded mind within, and like in your samadhi, even though you're driving down the road. This is when you're actually driving down the road and you can sense these other dimensions into the celestial and God consciousness. But you're also, and the cities, these abilities begin to unfold, but you're also saying, oh, everything is just this consciousness. But I'm seeing it both as consciousness and resonating as that tree, or the star, or the earth, or this piece of metal I'm in. It's all conscious. That's unity consciousness. Very profound, beautiful state, because that's what's called unity, because the oneness from within merges with the oneness of the direct experience of all this. And that's why there's that saying, all this is that. Meaning, all of the creation, everything you're seeing in this room is actually pure consciousness resonating frequencies as whatever discrete object and person, body, floor, whatever. But in reality, it's all pure consciousness. It's the play and display of the great unbounded manifesting. And then but it's a direct perception and experience. Then there's one more level, a little more abstract, and I took you there last night, although I didn't tell you. That's Brahman consciousness. So you're experiencing all these states and unity consciousness, but now you can experience the entirety of the cosmos anywhere, out in space, other dimensions, as an extension of your own self. Again, the saying that, he who has known his true self hath verily known God. Well, they're not talking about your ego. They're talking about this aspect of yourself that is that. But when you can have this, you're literally experiencing the galaxies and the stars and everything as an emanation from the consciousness which you have become. Even though you're still aware of your individuality, at that point, you're so rarefied and fine that what's left of your individuality has been called 𝗟liche vidya. It's a term in the Sanskrit. 𝗟liche vidya it actually means the remnant of ignorance, but what it refers to is the last little remnant of separation and individuation that exists, and that always exists. So every person and being in the universe that exists, no matter what, there's still a 𝗟liche vidya, this trace. So even if you decided to just merge with the boundless ocean of unbounded being, you're still there, and with volition, you could then remanifest astrally, physically. So you can go boom, boom. There's that 𝗟liche vidya is always there because it's in the frequency. Is this making any sense? Uh-huh. Okay. Now try to articulate the experience, my experience with it. So then, So that's, that's a beautiful state. Now think of this, all these higher states of consciousness, there are civilizations whose level, their people are at that level, and their technologies are an extension of that. Remember at the end of the last session, I said, everything that can be done in consciousness in the cities can be done technologically, and vice versa. So now let's go to the next slide. This is where it gets cool. What's all interesting. So, you have this, and this is another good one to memorize. You have the innate cities that you hear about all the time. Pop culture, remote viewing, right? Then you have things like, lucid dreams, levitation. You hear people who get into even the early Christian era, there were accounts in the big churches, there were priests that were levitating, and they tried to hush all that up because they thought that's not cool. But it was really cool. Now I've had a couple levitation experiences. One deliberate that I did when we had to get in a car from a thunderstorm during a 𝗖𝗘𝗱 event on Blanca Peak in Colorado up at 9,000 feet. And I was there and I said, well, let me see. So I put these counter-rotating forces in and then pushed all this energy into it and created this vortex like an anti-gravity, and the car lifted up. And the people in it, and the ones beside it lifted up some. I shouldn't have done that, really, but it was cool. Everybody witnessed it. I said, oh, yeah, well, I was just playing around with something here. But back when I was a kid, when I was 20 or 21, I went on an advanced teacher meditation course for advanced teachers. And we were doing these rounding, we call it, meditation, 8 hours a day. So you do some asanas, yoga positions, pranayama, breathing, and then meditation, and then over again. So we do 4 in the morning, 4 in the evening before dinner. So you're in this state, and it was spring, and I love the earth, and I love life and the flowers, and I was in such a state of bliss. And I'm walking in this field outside this hotel that had been taken over for this course, and I just spontaneously lift up and go from like here over to that thing, that stanchion. But then my monkey mind kicked in. I'm going, how is this happening? Why is it? What am I doing? Then it went, that was it. The grace was lost. So you have to leave yourself behind and then walk upon the water. And so there's a grace, there's a flow consciousness. And most people live in ego and intellect, and that shuts it all off. It's very interesting. It's because you're in this state of pure bliss and sort of selflessness, and you're in that moment. So the levitation experiences I've had a few, but those are, that's how it happens. And I can teach people on a more extended course how to go into the state of consciousness and then intend it. And you can practice it, but it's not important to do that. I mean, we have cars and planes. But I do love the story of the Buddha coming across this person filled with ego and pride, because he had learned one of the cities of how to meditate and levitate. And so there was a stream, and he was on one side, and he said, oh, Buddha, Buddha, look what I can do, like a child. And he goes, whoop, and he levitates across the stream. But there was a footbridge there, and the Buddha walks across and says, yes, but you wasted 30 years of your life. You could have used the footbridge. Now, why is that an important story? Because the cities should unfold naturally, or for some bigger purpose than ego bomb and pride or what have you. If they're used for the betterment of society, same thing with remote viewing, all these techniques, it needs to be done for a higher purpose, or it is a diversion off the path of enlightenment into what I call the baubles, the little shiny things out there. So you could spend a whole life on a bauble here, and an ability there, and another ability here, and you haven't progressed your overall state of enlightenment. This is a bit of wisdom that gets lost. And the other analogy about that is how important it is for, it can be misused as well. So, you can use these abilities for good, but you could also use them for harm if all you focus on was being able to do it. This was the whole problem with the CIA and other programs I won't name. teaching people to remote view, but for a military target or just so they could get something, get her done. But they were not developing the overall state of consciousness of those young guys, military and agency people. Most became alcoholic, mentally ill, and committed suicide because it was an asymmetric development of a capability. Asymmetric meaning they were having these experiences, they had no context for it, they had no wisdom, and they had no overarching altruistic, selfless purpose, and they couldn't handle what was happening. So you need to, there's a wisdom to having these abilities. And if you do have them happen spontaneously, then this is the moral conundrum. What do I use them for? Do I use them so I can make a lot of money on Wall Street? Or do I use them to help the planet? This is very important, by the way. Very important, because one goes to the path of ruin and delay of the development of yourself. The other can be greatly enlightening. So it's like any tool. A knife, you can put butter on your bread, or you can use it to slit someone's throat, like the kind of people I take care of. So I think that's why you have to consider. It's not, in and of itself, the cities are fine, but they're controversial in some circles because they have been misused, because they're not attached to a higher purpose, a pure-hearted intent. So always attach your capabilities to that, no matter what it is. Really important. So you get these. Everybody knows what remote viewing, you're in consciousness, you can see a remote place. We're going to do a practicum in a little while. Lucid dreams, levitation, teleportation. Now, interestingly, what are the ET versions of that? Well, for remote viewing, they have technology-assisted consciousness, where they have the ability innately, but it gets augmented and made very precise through an electromagnetic system that augments that capability, that is interfacing with consciousness and thought at resonant frequencies. A man who offered me one of these devices in 1992 or 3 had developed them back in 1956, and his company was bought out by a front company for the CIA called 𝗬𝗏𝗰𝗁𝗄. But the guy, I said, no, I don't want one of those. I think that's going to put too big of a target on me, and I don't need it. But those were fully developed and operational in covert programs in 1956. How? They had already had 10 years or more to study these technologies off ET craft. So imagine having a device, and it augments your own consciousness ability to use the non-local other dimensions to see, but also to receive. So this is where you get, both directions, where you can have precognition and with it, and remote seeing, but you can see even off the timeline into the future. And there was a couple of programs that I know folks who were in called Operation Red Light and Looking Glass, where they were developing and studying reverse engineering extraterrestrial materials and objects to be able to do that. Then you get in levitation, all right? So I told you these funny stories. But if you can do that through consciousness, you can do it through technology. Just remember this. It's a leitmotif. It comes through all this. So you can create a type of resonant field that causes something to become virtually massless, or you're not weight, mass. And as that is reduced by these electromagnetic frequencies, the object will lift. And that was, of course, observed first and studied by T. Townsend Brown and the 𝗖𝗚𝗌 experiment in 1928 and 1929, using crystalline materials and wires and voltages at certain frequencies. And we know what all that is. It began to be studied, and of course, T. Townsend Brown's work became the foundation for the RAND Corporation. All right, FYI. So that's a long time, it's 100 years ago, right, almost. Now, imagine that experimentation that did become classified, that river of knowledge and experimentation joining with the ET operational devices that you see. So people say, oh, did our ability to do this come from just the ETs? I said, no. The laws of the universe are universal. So if it's come through the consciousness of ET civilizations that may be 100,000 or 1,000,000 years more advanced, it can come through humans too, and has, because that's that level of consciousness. When you realize that 𝗬𝗏𝗏 it's called, 𝗬𝗏, is that level of consciousness where everything can be known. One thing at a time, 10 things at a time as you become more adept. And the great being knows all things at all times from that level of 𝗬𝗏𝗏, 𝗬𝗏. So it comes through the minds of any conscious sentient people in phases, as they develop. So that's, of course, how that happens. Now, you've heard of masters teleporting, where somebody will be sitting someplace and suddenly they just teleport and they're somewhere else, 3D. Now, that's sort of a macro application of what Einstein called the spooky effect, where the same particle would be two places at once. Boom, like boom, boom, almost instantly. Now, that is a known phenomenon in physics, but now extrapolate forward, and when you figure that out, what the mechanisms, the trans-dimensional mechanisms are of that, doing it for a whole spacecraft or a person. So innately, you can learn to do that through the mastery of that city, 𝗖𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗃. But, you can also do it electromagnetically, frequencies. So that's what, when you talk about craft that teleport. And remember, I told you the funny story, well, it's sort of tragic, when that whole helicopter squadron from the top secret guy was teleported back to their helicopter base in the northern range of Nellis instantly. So that is a very well-developed interstellar capability. There are capabilities that are human. I have one of it. If you read the disclosure book that we put out for the Disclosure Project in 2001, there was a military witness who was at an Air Force base in Canada where they were teleporting. They had an electromagnetic device, and they put, it's kind of gross, and the big glass ashtrays, because everybody smoked back then in 53, and they could teleport it from there to another device instantly across this huge base back and forth. That was 1953, Fred Threlfeld. Read it. So I know nobody reads, but very politically incorrect to read. So next. So now we get into some of the little stranger ones. And this is where, an object is sitting right there and it dematerializes. And these are trans-dimensional interstellar. They all have the ability to be fully on, like this podium, and in an instant, dematerialize. It's still there, though. Here's the magic. We'll get into this in a minute. It's still there, but how do you see it? You can feel it. You can see it with your consciousness. And you can see it by developing your conscious abilities for celestial perception, because you'll see its frequency there. But it's beyond the crossing point and speed of light and matter, but it's there. Now, this is a really advanced concept. And this is what we train. When we go on these week-long events, that's what we train people to do. And not everyone gets that in a whole week, but a lot do. Now, you can do this through the cities as well. You've heard of masters who just dematerialize and they appear and they rematerialize right in front of people, right there. And that is not uncommon. You have another correlation in the cities, or the manifestation or materialization of objects. So you've heard of people who are greatly enlightened and they say, oh, you want and they materialize a ruby or a ring. Or even if you read Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, entire cities that they can appear and then dematerialize. Totally can do that. And that's human. Now, the interstellar, trans-dimensional interstellar, TDIS, remember, all interstellar civilizations have to be trans-dimensional, because you can't stay solid matter and going through faster than the speed of light. They are, by definition, trans-dimensional. So they're traversing these dimensions. They have that ability. So they can literally manifest objects. And their manufacturing, like I mentioned earlier, is using this level of these other dimensions and energy and bringing it into full 3D materialization. Now, that's a science, though. I mean, you're talking about creating a sort of resonant frequency technologically. It's very subtle. That's in the form of, say, an architectural, the whole schematic very holographically. And then it goes from that state in the near astral, the gap I described, into boom, it's solid right here. That's why we see the light from these objects. It's not like light here, because all the minerals and elements and the whole structure are of such purity that even in the vacuum of space, we could not manufacture that. So I have a new top secret person coming forward that's been analyzing part of a craft that crashed in 46, 47 in Brazil. And interestingly, that metallurgy, you know, he was talking to me about, and I started describing, he says, yes, that's exactly how it has to be done. Because he was doing all the research for it, for some folks that are shadowy, but I'm getting all those files and handing them over. Yeah. Oh, yes. He's cooperating, the cooperating witness. They might as well cooperate, or will we hit them with a subpoena? You want to play nice? Not nice. Let's be nice. Okay, so that's really cool. Now, then you get into this thing of bilocation, trilocation, what have you. You've heard of this, where an enlightened master will be one place and then be seen another place, and the people have seen them physically. Now, how is that? Well, this is like the same thing with the spooky effect, but where it's not a quick movement. It's you keep that standing wave here, and you replicate it. Why? Because we're thinking linearly. In reality, that point in space and this point in space, you can have it appear simultaneously, but you can do 3 or 4 or 5. Right? Now, you can do that innately in the meditative state when you begin to practice cities and they start unfolding if you need to. I tell people that if you get into a higher state of consciousness, every city you need will be available to you when it's urgent. So you don't have to waste a lot of time unless it's something you need to learn to do, like being able to see, remote view, and communicate with the ETs. The whole CE5 contact protocol is, in fact, a very advanced city. Just look at it that way. That we've sort of made into a system that millions of people are now doing. Now, this gets into this question of, are some of these craft the same craft over and over again? Yes. I'll tell you really, I like illustrating these abstract ideas with an example. So there was an actor and singer who was on my executive committee back in the 90s named 𝗿𝗏𝗰𝗁. He had been on, with Elizabeth Taylor movies and singer, and really nice guy. And I would go to he had moved out of the LA, Santa Barbara, and Montecito up to 𝗂𝗗𝗏, Washington. So I'd be at his house and sitting with him, and we got to know each other really well. And wonderful, sweet man, but he wasn't in good health by the time I met him. But his wife, Dorothy, was amazing. And so, I was at their home and was teaching them all this, and teaching Dorothy and their grandchild to go out and do CE5 on the ocean. And they were doing it, and craft would appear on the cloud and disappear. I'm also the guy because he was so close to Marilyn Monroe, and he wanted to know how Marilyn Monroe died. So I gave her the document where it's a transcript the day before they found her dead, that, they wet worked her and killed her because she was going to hold a press conference to tell the world about what Jack Kennedy told her during Pillow Talk about the ET issue. So I have that document. It's top secret, has not been declassified, and I published it. It's in my book. Nobody's read it. Anyway. I'm fascinated by humans this way. Okay, but so you put everything tied up in a bow on a silver platter and they go, huh? I know. I'm a tough professor. Anyway, that led to her beginning to do this on their own. So I go back, I get this call, and you have to remember was it 94, the Northridge earthquake in LA? Okay, so she's up in 𝗂𝗗𝗏, Washington. She comes downstairs very early in the morning, and there's an ET craft, blue, circular, outside over her driveway, and where there's a courtyard, and this blue light coming into her, connecting to her, and it's ETs. And she's going, oh my God. And they say, do not be afraid. We're always with you. You will be protected. She is told intuitively, I forget her name. It was her best friend who lived in LA. She picks up the phone, calls her, And the woman goes, Dorothy, you wouldn't believe what's going on. There's a blue craft outside with a beam coming in saying, do not be afraid. We are always with you. You will be protected during this earth change thing, right? An earthquake. And I'm going, well, there's a lesson in that. If you go forward in the future and the earth begins to have instability, everybody doing 𝗖𝗍𝗱, there's a reason why I need millions of people knowing how to do it. The future of the planet counts on it. But she asked me, was that the same ship in two places? I said, absolutely. It was the same craft at the same instant, just like the spooky effect, but in two places. So that's really cool. All right. So that's another manifestation of all this. And then you have, you have the stories of people who can remotely heal through prayer, meditative, different abilities and consciousness. What's beautiful is that the medical technology of the ETs, it's using these transdimensional fields to heal and do amazingly beautiful events at our trainings. We don't have time to go into it, but there is a young woman, the most wonderful, brilliant, sweet, spiritual person who since age 17 has had metastatic bone cancer and is now 24, and it's going everywhere. And so she came to the training a few days ago up in Oracle, and we asked the ETs to come in, and I looked over by her and I saw this little guy, but not 3D, but sort of like a holographic, subtle energy. And I said, well, there's an ET right by you. She went into a state with one of our other team members assisting, where she was taken on a craft in her spirit body, and they did all this work and were trying to clearing the cancer when and her neck was completely frozen. She couldn't move it because the cancer had gotten into all the bones of the vertebra, and it was just all grown in there. She got back from this experience, I guess it was a half hour or something, and she's moving her. She's, I've been completely, she's totally fine with that. And so they're trying to work on her. So we had that just happen a few days ago. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, go back. I just got emotional. I love this girl. So, think about this. Now, I was in a underground facility on the border of Mexico and El Paso years ago. And very funny story how that happened. I was being invited by a group of scientists working on some of these kind of technologies to come see what they had. And they were medical. I'm a doctor. And so I go there. I'm going through Houston Airport. And there's this guy following me around with a beard and all this. And he kept following me. Went to the bathroom. I said, what kind of perv? What are you doing? And okay. And finally he comes up to me and he says, Dr. Greer, I'm Billy F. Gibbons. I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. He said, 𝗖𝗍 𝗱. He was the lead guy for 𝗖𝗍 𝗱. She's got those legs, that whole thing. And with the beard and all this. I said, oh, cool. He says, I have a seat in first class for you on this flight to El Paso if you'll let me go into this skiff, this place. And I said, how do you know about this? She says, well, I'm friends with those scientists. And like they really are into my music and da-da-da. I said, oh, well, cool. I said, well, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me. We're going into their turf, not mine. So we had this great conversation. We go in there and they have these technologies where someone with a spinal cord severed, they can put a resonant field around it, transdimensional, regrow it. You have a missing limb, they can attach to you just have phantom pain. The astral body, that subtle, is still there. And they could connect to it and regrow the limb. No, this is for real. And I'm going, oh my God, and the stuff I have to do in the emergency department with people with brains coming out of their noses. But, it's kind of like Star Trek where you put something over something. And so, those are extant on the planet now, but they're classified. Why? The physics behind how those operate lead to everything else. And then you end oil and coal and the petrodollar and all public utilities, and half the Fortune 500 companies' capitalization goes to zero. All right? It's tragic. This power thing locked into the 1800s paradigm is literally killing people, literally. and the planet. This is why we have to have disclosure like yesterday, okay? So putting that in your mind for a moment, now let's consider what are the consequences of that. Before I go to this next slide, if you're a civilization that is advancing through these levels of consciousness, and remember, it happens pretty quickly. Once you're no longer scrubbing around, you know, we're still fighting in the Middle East. You know, I lived in Israel 3 years. Over in the Wat, there's nothing there. People are killing each other, blowing each other up. What's there? It's nothing. It's like out here in the desert. There's nothing there. Murdering each other like you can't see over ideology, religion, this square piece of earth here, this ideology there. But once we get that sorted out, and you bring out the technologies in a state of peace where you can have no poverty and disease, what will people turn their attention to? Well, there'll be certain people who just play more video games and watch kitty cats on YouTube play the piano, but a critical mass of people, large number, will then be turning to the development of consciousness and creative pursuits. Because the work week will go down 10 to 15 hours, everyone will have abundance, then what do? So this whole creative aspect will kick in. No one's going to be racing around trying to be the big monkey to get more money from here and here, because who cares? You have what you need. So at that point, a civilization advances very quickly because they're freed up from the animal aspect of trying to grab stuff, and the whole consciousness shifts to abundance. You have what you need. So then, now what? You're alive, you're in a 3D form with a body, and so you begin to really explore and have the time to explore consciousness, the cities, spiritual states, beautiful technologies, and all of those applied peacefully, because you become a level 1 civilization, okay, which we have up here now. What's beautiful about that is that this going from where we are, we're level 0 in the category, unfortunately. We could have been a level 1 about 120, 30 years ago. But that's been hijacked by people who benefit from conflict. But human civilization now is a 0. Disunity, war, primitive in technologies destroying the environment, extinction level events possible. Particularly once you hit the threshold we hit in the 40s. You know, when you unravel the mystery of the atom and matter, that gets applied with the consciousness of war, conflict. That's how you end a civilization, along with the environmental damage from withholding the other technologies. So right now we're in the kind of the worst of all situations. Looking at the big, giant picture here, we have 8 billion people. We have enough technology that birth rates and longevity is happening, but we're using 1800s technologies. We're using literally technologies from the 1800s. The most advanced technologies we have would be nuclear power from 1945, atomic power. And by the way, all that is splitting the atom, creating heat. The heat boils water, heats water, and you have a generator that turns, just like an old choo-choo train, where you burn coal. It's just instead of burning coal or oil, you're splitting the atom, and now you have 100,000 years of deadly toxic waste, right? That's all a nuclear power plant is. Most people think an atomic power or nuclear power plant is taking direct energy from the atom magically. No, it's a boiler. It's steam. You're heating and turning a generator from the steam and heat. Most people don't know that. And it's like, why? This is like, that's what we're going to, in this movie, The 𝗂 Century, we're going to graph this out so the public understands what a complete fraud the entire energy system of the world is and what it should be replaced with, which we must bring out together, you, me, and all of us. Now, when you reach a level 1, the hallmark of a level 1 civilization, it's peaceful, it's no longer engaged in organized murder, meaning war, to resolve problems, and they're bringing out these technologies. So what all of us are here trying to do, we're creating a bridge community to the ETs, but simultaneously, we're wanting to fix the planet. Now, it could have happened sequentially. The planet could have been fixed between 1880s and 1925, 30. But we dropped that ball. And because we dropped that ball and the industrial fascist interests kept moving it, keeping it down, we now don't have time to do both sequentially. We have to do the interstellar because they're here. We have covert programs targeting them. That's an existential threat to our planet and others with weapons that are scalar, faster than the speed of light. And the biosphere is at a collapse point. And 3 billion people are living in such poverty that it's almost unimaginable. And 48% of the human population does not have plumbing in their houses. 48%. So these all have to be fixed out of compassion. And you say, well, let's fix that and then deal with the ET issue. No, sorry, because the ET issue was landed in our lap when we detonated the first atomic bomb. There have been covert programs that have taken that in the most dangerous direction possible. So if you're looking at the whole system and not just one little slice of it, then you realize you have to do a comprehensive transformation involving all these issues. Now, a level 2 civilization, from that foundation of peace, you have this permanent long-term peace where you then pursue all these transdimensional technologies. But now you're in a society, global society, that's using them only for the good, all right? And anyone who does otherwise is completely put on a leash and a harness. They're stood down hard. Remember, the first initial era of level 1 and 2, it'll be the peace of the chained dogs, is the expression. In other words, there will always be a sociopath that gets power who will try to abuse this kind of science and technology. Collectively, the people of the world have to say, nope, you're done, right? Now, people don't like to hear that. Everyone thinks we're going to be Pollyanna in all of a state of enlightenment all at once. No, this process is multi-generational. And unfortunately, I mean, I know I'm sort of very optimistic, really, about the future, but I'm realistic about the human conditions being in the emergency department with murderers and rapists and everybody else coming in every hour. You know, I have a clear appreciation of what humans are capable of, unfortunately, up front and close. And that isn't going to vanish instantly. There's always going to be a Hitler or a Pol Pot or a Dick Cheney or whoever. Whatever. I mean, that you just have to say, okay, then what do you do with that? So, but at this point, it's permanent peace with people who have put systems in place to absolutely never let that happen again. The whole never again, right? I think it was funny during Vietnam War, the Who, I went to their concert when I was 18. We won't be fooled again. Well, we have been, and again, and again, and again, and again. So that has to stop. You know, where we get manipulated into one conflict and war after another by the people who profit from war, the warmongers, the war profiteers, the contractors, and the people who want to control people through demagoguery and division, right? Once you hit there, as I said, then everyone begins to turn to pursuing higher states of consciousness next. Now, level 3, this is where you're cleared interstellar. So once you're permanently peaceful and you've developed these interstellar transdimensional technologies, now you're interstellar. Because the quarantine, speaking of quarantine, before COVID, I spoke of this cosmic quarantine around the Earth, because they're really not thrilled about a group of guerrillas clubbing each other with nuclear weapons who are still fighting over patches of land and old ideologies from old religions and what have you, banging around in another star system, right? That ain't going to happen, no matter what mythology you've heard from the UFO nuts. So sorry to tell you. So that, ouch, I know I can be rough sometimes, but that's really important to understand. So at this point, then you're cleared because you're peaceful, you're not using these technologies violently, and you've developed them so that they are stable, trans-dimensional systems where you can take entire spacecraft and people from point A to B, another star system, another galaxy. So now you're in this sequence going up. Those the corollary to that is that there's rapid increase in the study of consciousness and more people begin to experience cosmic consciousness in these other states, but not a critical mass, but they're still very peaceful. And you begin to get integrated. Within the next 1,000 years, Earth and humans will be integrated into every star system that's interstellar. That's what I have been told. So this is very exciting. 1,000 years isn't that long, really. Now, at level 4, this is where you have cosmic consciousness in at least 1%. So we talk about the 1% factor, like when you meditate, but imagine there's another quantum jump here, and that's when 1% of a population is firmly established in cosmic consciousness. At that point, the whole civilization changes its orientation to where they're now able to get into higher and higher states of consciousness collectively, but the cities and their correlations in technologies really takes off. So at that point, the senior ambassadors, all of the ambassadors from Earth to other planets would be at least established in cosmic consciousness, that first state of higher. And they're emissaries with other civilizations, but in a higher function than the initial exploration. Those who are also providing guidance to other civilizations. So let's say there's a planet that's where we are now or where we were 1,000 years ago. Those civilizations, because they're recently out of that, can relate to. It's like because I was raised in such poverty and abuse, I can relate to homeless people and starving people and all that. So similarly, those cultures would be advanced enough to deal with emerging civilizations, because this whole processional goes on all over the cosmos without beginning in time or space. It's beautiful. So then, now this is now the big leap right here. When everyone on a planet is born in cosmic consciousness. Born. That is, because epigenetically, if you understand what we've discovered, there's all they used to call it junk DNA. No, it isn't junk. So in states of meditation and higher consciousness, there's a genetic unlocking that happens. And whatever ability is developed passes on in one generation. One. And they just recently found that in the seminal vesicles and RNA of males, that is actually in one generation passed on. Very interesting neuroscience and genetics and epigenetic studies going on all this, which I won't bore you with the data, but just understand that it isn't something that takes thousands of years. You reach this point, it's the next generation, goes beautiful. So at this point, when you have everyone born into cosmic consciousness, widespread, the whole planet's enlightened, and these cities accelerate because everyone's in that state going in towards this more beautiful ability to just think and materialize something. And the technologies then parallel that state of consciousness. So the technologies become more and more like cosmic and celestial. Next. And this, where you get to here, this is where it keeps going on. At level 6, you have the 1% or more of the population are in God consciousness, able to materialize things, do all the cities, everything. And that world actually takes on qualities almost of a celestial realm. The construction, the energy, the facilities. It'd be easy to mistake them for an astral world and not a physical world. It's that beautiful, gorgeous, exquisite. Then level 7 is when everyone is born in God consciousness. By the end of this 500,000 year cycle, Homo sapiens will be at 7. Every man, woman, child born on the planet will be born in that state of God consciousness, and then learning unity consciousness after that. So this is the trajectory we are on. It's beautiful. This is why I'm always so optimistic, because I've seen this. And these civilizations correlate to the celestial realm, not just resemble it, some of the qualities. In other words, at that state, as you know, in God consciousness, you can decide to drop the body or be in a physical form. You can, you have all the cities mastered in your availability. And so at that point, imagine a whole civilization that has that, but then there are technologies and they're light ships. That's why the craft that was out in Wilcox, the whole craft itself was itself God consciousness related. The energy and the state of that state of consciousness was emanating from the craft. It was a beautiful experience. And we get visited by those periodically on our 𝗖𝗘𝗱 expeditions. And then going further, level 8, all the technologies are innately like cities and look like celestial. So this level 8, this just gets a further refinement to where most people would confuse that civilization with an angel or something from the celestial realm, every manifestation of it. But they're still not. They actually have planets, what have you. Next. Now we get into something that's almost beyond human experience, but the Brahman universal consciousness state, 1% again reaches that. Those are the guardians of other worlds. That's that light being. And in level 10, not just 1%, but the entire planet are experiencing the cosmos and the creation as themselves, individually and collectively. Very advanced, beautiful states. And I understand there's progression beyond what I've been able to see here, but it's not a human, I don't think a human, what I've been told is the humans, we can't comprehend that yet. All this we can comprehend easily, right? Yeah. We can. Say you can and you will. As ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. So that tour de force, to what end did I go through all this? Because when we're out under the stars and something happened, like we just came on this training, and we're sitting there, and there are suddenly a group of celestial looking lights, very subtle, and some not so subtle. Each one of those can be either an ET being or an entire spacecraft. And the only way you're going to know is to go into consciousness and see it through remote viewing or feeling it with your heart, sensing it. Now, periodically one will come in, like we were there last week, and we have some videos and photos, and you'll just see these golden spheres that materialize in the desert, and then they float a bit or may come towards us and vanish in thin air. Same thing with these beautiful blue objects that were appearing on the hill, maybe 50 to 100 yards from us. And we have a photo of that. I took it with my iPhone 13, and I never take pictures. So there are all these things that begin to happen. But to understand it, you have to understand that, well, you could be interacting with a level 3 or 4 civilization, or it could be one of these celestial at this level. Now you will feel that. Often when it's at the level of a level 8 or higher, you will have like we were there and we had this scent of the essence of roses, attar of rose come in. And another time it was a whole area was filled with carnation scent. And those are the ones that celestial, angelic, but they were ETs, and we had all this phenomenon going on and our detectors going off. So it's really cool, fun stuff. But so when you do this at home with people, you need to have this understanding that they're not just one civilization with bug eyes, not the, forget the myth and the narrative. There are all these different civilizations, countless of them, at different levels of technology correlating to their level of consciousness. And that's why there's such a spread, an array of experiences that can happen. Similarly, we've had experiences where the entire group will be in meditation, and on the app, CE5 Contact app, there's one thing called the Mount Shasta tones. What you hear isn't really quite what it sounded like, because back then we just had a little mini cassette, and this tone came through. And we heard this tone. It was coming from southwest to northeast towards the volcano, Shasta. And we're there in circle meditating, but as it crossed the perimeter of the circle, and came right over us. It's almost at head level. The sound. Everyone with their eyes closed could see this spherical ET object that was going bloop, 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 like a string of pearls. And not just one, I mean, it was like really cool. So that was Vedic name and form, the tonality in the mind, you could see it. But it didn't materialize 3D, but it was an ET object, went straight to the volcano. Cool stuff. So there are millions of different ways, if you understand this, I know this is a quick trip through some complex ideas, that these ET beings and craft can appear. Now, here's where discernment kicks in. Something could be going on, and you have your great-grandmother is there doing something. The native people on that land emerge because you're in this state of sacred consciousness. The ETs are there, and just for good measure, covert program sends in a drone. This happened, what, how many times? 4 or 5 times this past week. Because, like I said, the good news is I'm here, the bad news is I'm here. So, you know, I have these things around all the time. We're there filming these things, you know, they're like, you know, bumblebees, you know. But, so again, experience is the great teacher. I'm trying to take you through the fundamental baseline of knowledge so that you can then go out and have discernment. But realistically, all that's happening frequently. In the course of a week, everything I've mentioned happens. Materialized objects, healing, the precognition of the things that are going to happen in the future, people having contact, their light bodies going on craft, ET beings touching people and walking behind us, objects visibly seen, videotape, the whole panoply, all of it, which is really fun. Where I always go, why do we do anything else? This is so awesome, you know. And cancel the rest of my life. If I had any sense, I would. So that's really beautiful. And remember, depending on the state of the consciousness of the civilization, some will have more abilities than others, right? Because it's progressive. But they're all peaceful. They've all reached a level, at least level 3. And many of them, interestingly, the deeper their consciousness the group goes in coherently, the more they can perceive and the more that will come that are at that higher level of consciousness. Because like seeketh like and taketh pleasure in the company of its kind. Great quote. Like seeketh like and taketh pleasure. So they're going to be drawn to, because they say, well, here are some receptive humans who can understand what we're doing. So the higher in consciousness you can achieve, the more that you'll have more and more and more advanced civilizations come. Now, the other thing that's very interesting, in the last few years, and this didn't happen for the first couple of decades of this project, from 1990 to maybe, you know, 2000 something, they were established ET civilizations that were cleared to interact with humans, that we're leading this, you know, outreach to. Now, every time we do this, Pat will tell you, there are brand new civilizations that have never been cleared to go interact with humans that are interacting with CE5 teams. So we're actually, when I say we're ambassadors to the universe from Earth, we're literally doing that ambassadorial pioneering work. And it's kind of beautiful because they're a world, and some of them are very funny, and they're like, well, I think they find it funny and appalling when they see everything. But they're very funny sense of humor too. And so these are civilizations of various stages, but that were not cleared through this interstellar council yet to come here. Now they're coming because there are more and more people doing CE5, and it's potentiating that field, and people are becoming more and more advanced in their perceptual abilities. So we're coming to this crescendo. You know, as the world kind of collapses, this other thing's emerging simultaneously, which is how it always happens. One, you know, you have to realize one era is crumbling and another one's unfolding simultaneously, you know, phoenix-like, out of the ashes. So we're not in ashes yet. God help us. Hope we don't get there, but we are in Phoenix. Interestingly. So those are all things to, you know, that information is really key, because when we go tonight, what I'm going to do before we do our meditation, I'm going to take you through a lot of videos and images so that represent this sort of various ET phenomenon and the way it appears. You know, it can be a fully materialized craft, it can be electromagnetic tone, they can play with our, well, they're gone, the electronic devices that dematerialized off the table. No, they were taken. And then they can do everything in between. In consciousness, celestial, dream time, you go on board. We're sitting in the circle meditating, and people literally in their light bodies are on board a ship being healed. All that. It's a phenomenal, beautiful. There really should be a whole series about this. It might be too strange for the public right now, but we'll get them there. You have to do it step by step, right? Okay, so, sorry. So that's sort of an overview of this cosmology and its applications. Now, one application, what we need to do, because this is on the schedule that I've built in, is we want to do, for about 45 minutes, an exercise. And I want to introduce it by saying that, you know, the pop culture term is remote viewing, right? But in reality, that's not what it is. You're viewing basically consciousness in its non-local form and intending to see linearly a distant place. Now, there are different techniques that can trick the mind to do it. You know, there's the 𝗻𝑠ync, and there's this, and there's that. The way of the seer, let's call the tradition of the seers, and the rishis, is that you understand that your third eye is actually consciousness, all right? That is your third eye. And that by going into meditative states and quieting the mind, but then having this technique, the way I like to teach it is this subtle technique where when you're relaxed and you're centered and calm, you, without force of ego, but with the unfolding of the power of your innate consciousness, you intend to see or know something. So you can intend to see something hidden or in another place. Or you can intend to see what's going to happen Sunday night. Or you can intend to see what's down the road as you're driving. So I do it while I'm waking, dreaming, sleeping, driving. It's very useful. So you have your physical senses, but as the song goes, you don't see with your eyes, you see with your mind, right? The eyes are simply the instrument. You're actually perceiving with your mind, but that mind is in the consciousness field, and the field of consciousness is omnipresent. And because it's omnipresent, when you're silent and you're more centered in that state, you can then perceive by intending a distant place or event. That's what remote viewing is. And there, you know, there was a really hilarious dude named 𝗖𝗍𝗱. I don't know if you all heard of him. He was a remote viewer, and I got to know him, and he regretted, oh yeah, I was at his apartment and in New York and all that. Now he loves what we're doing. He loved what we're doing. He still loves what we're doing. And he regretted that his skills were taken in by the intelligence community. But he said he did that because he got so much kind of like an ego charge out of it, you know, of doing it for the CIA and all this. But in reality, you know, that was when he was young. But later, as he was older, he really wished that he had just done what we were doing, and very much loved what we were doing. I have a beautiful letter from 𝗖𝗍𝗱. But I think when we're looking at this, he had cool art too. He's quite an artist. And hilarious gay guy in the East Village in New York. Oh my God, we went everywhere. Outrageous, funny. Good. We had a great time. I'll go anywhere. Skiffs, this, that. But what was fun about that is that as he got older, he realized that city should only be used for the good, the common good, unselfishly, not for some hard militaristic purpose or what have you. So that is really exciting because you realize that even towards as people get later in life who've been in those projects, they do transform. I was talking to someone at the break about this. They can be moved into understanding this in a higher conscious way that then benefits humanity and with wisdom. And that's how we want to present this. I want to present this as a technique Many ways to do this. Now, the key thing is that we're going to do a meditation. I'm going to lead sort of a breathing Zen technique, watching the breath. We'll go into meditation, and then we're going to do something, which is it's a fun technique where I'm going to take you someplace and give you a location, and we're going to look at it together, right? We're going to see it. So this is one approach. You can also do it where you put something in a basket or a box, and one person, the control, knows what it is, the other people don't. There are a lot of ways to do it. You can use your imagination. Your phone rings and don't look at it. And this is what I tell people. Yogananda said, the development of these abilities is easy if you put your attention to it, but because of lassitude and a lack of creativity, most people don't engage that. So think about it. Every time you're driving down the road, see what's a mile or two down the road. Someone knocks at the door when you weren't expecting one. See who it is. A package arrives and you weren't expecting it. See what's in it. The phone rings. When I get up in the morning, I feel what are in my email list before I look at it. How many and what's in there. This is like going to the gym and working out, right? So I tell people, you wanted to go to the gym and leg press 700 pounds or something like I did the other day. You're not going to do that starting from nothing. You'll break your, back. So it's ability that you develop, but you develop it by being mindful. Mindfulness consists of knowing that no matter what you're doing, your conscious mind, whereby you're perceiving, if you connect to the consciousness itself, it's already omnipresent. So when you actually own that bit of information, that knowledge, then you just intend. So you're driving down the road and there it is. You see it a mile before. I was once in Montana going to Glacier National Park, and I'm driving along. I was by myself, and suddenly I have what I call an override, a vision. I'm driving on the road at 70 miles an hour. And I see an intersection with a collision in a remote area. And I knew there were fatalities, but some survived. So I started looking around the car for anything I could use medically. This is how sure I was of it. A little while later, half an hour later, I come to an intersection and an SUV went through an intersection and hit a T-boned a Ford Taurus with a German couple visiting from Germany. And they were killed instantly, and the people in the SUV were still, and I was there helping them and getting, a helicopter to medevac come in. But that was all seen before, so I was prepared. Now, I know that sounds weird, but in the emergency, I don't care what job, you're a pilot, see something, over the horizon. You have your radar, you have your over-horizon radar, which is your consciousness. The Top Gun pilots in the military have been identified as having this intuitive ability, this sense. So this is innate to all humans, though, all of you. One of the big problems is people think only Ingo Swann can do this, or only McMonagle, or only whoever. No. They've done studies and brought people into labs right off the street. And if they have asked them to do something like this, they turn out to have as much capability as someone who's been trained and working in the program. So everyone needs to own their own capabilities, right? Don't think for a minute that you can't do everything that you've heard any other person on the planet do. You can't. Because all those capabilities are your birthright folded within you. That is your birthright. And so it's a responsibility, though. It's easier to be, oh, poor little me, I'm a schlub and a housewife from Poughkeepsie and I can't do anything. It's a cop-out. It's a spiritual cop-out. It's very important for people to say, no, I'm a part of the creation. I'm conscious. My consciousness ability is equal to any rishi, guru, master, whatever that's ever lived on the planet. You really have to own that. And it's to say that's not where you may be, but you can be there. You can get there. If you don't have belief in yourself, this is the first step. You have to think you can do it. If you don't, I mean, I don't care if you're putting a chest tube in somebody. If I think I can't do that, I'm going to glitch, I'm going to glitch. So this positive affirmation that I can do this. This is what every human can do, because the studies have proven that you can take random people and have to give a task like this and they can do it. Similarly, the random number generator experiments that Dr. John at Princeton, and I got to know him before he passed away. They could take people off the street and they could just say, influence, put your awareness on this quantum random number generator and have it put out more ones and zeros. And it does, it shifts. If you have two people that love each other, it shifts even more, it can be exponential. So this is very exciting, because what you then realize is that since this is innate to everybody, everybody can learn these techniques, experiment with them, be creative with them. The other thing, now this gets a little more subtle. Everyone has a timbre, a sort of a frequency of their own individuality. And everyone learns things slightly differently or gets information slightly differently. Some people will see it. Some people will just know it. Some people will feel it. Some people will hear the word of what it is. Now, why is that? Because everyone's unique and everyone will gather this kind of intuitive information according to their own resonant frequency that's unique. The big problem is that people try to mimic what everyone else is doing. And I always liken this, my analogy is this unbounded state of consciousness, this omnipresent aspect, whereby you can see the future or remote places. That's like the hub of reality, of the wheel of life. But every single soul, if there are 8 billion people on the planet, there are 8 billion paths to that hub. And they're all unique. And they're all tied into that. But that's why you have to get to know your own self, experiment with this, and see how you, learn how you acquire that information. And it's going to be unique. Now, there are certain patterns. Some will be this way, that. But in terms of your own experience, the best someone like me can do, if they're honest and humble, is to say, this is an approach you can use. Now make it your own. Same thing with the meditation technique. Here's what I can share. Now make it your own. Here are the concepts. The beginning of ignorance is when people become chauvinistic and bombastic and rigid about these, which is all organized religion. And all political part, and all. As George Castaneda said, fanaticism consists of redoubling your effort when you've forgotten your goal. Very clever. So let's not forget what the goal is, and then you don't want to go off the music. This is the human sort of neuroses here. They just keep redoubling down when they're going the wrong way, right? So listen to your own self and feel how you do it, and know that you can. Hello? You said music? I don't know what that was. It's strange. Huh? Anyway, so now, getting into the sort of, let's deconstruct for a moment the technique. Go into quiet meditation. Now, you can do this in an instant or take 10 minutes to do it. Depends on your capabilities. When you center yourself in quiet mind, the key thing is, I think, whether you can do it in a second, you connect to that if you're proficient, or it may take you 10 or 20 minutes. You connect into that silent state. Don't be concerned with the task. Be concerned with the process of going into quiet mind and then take on the task, the imaging. Most people will say, I'm going to go right from superficial thinking monkey mind to doing it. And that's where they don't, they're missing the whole point. So you want to connect to that aspect. You want to affirm. These affirmations are important. That the conscious mind whereby you are awake is, in fact, wherever it is we're going to go see, right? It's omnipresent. So that's the nature of how you're conscious. So since that's your birthright, you say, well, I can do this, I just have to practice it. It's very powerful. The other is that when you begin to do it, what's very common, is totally normal, is that you'll be getting an impression. Let's say you put something in a box and you're trying to see what it is, all right? And the person who put it in there is to control, the other part of the team is trying to see it. Or in an envelope, doesn't matter. But say it's an object and someone put an orange in a container. Okay, you begin to sense, oh, it's something round, but you like basketball, and you make it a basketball. Or it's something round, you see it's orange, and you make it something that's orange, but not the orange. You sense it's something edible in a piece of fruit, and you make the orange into a strawberry or something. Now, so this is where you have to be sensitive to how you have a pure vision, a clear perception, and then how your memory and ego will then begin to alter it. But the way you do that is you do this over and over and over and over again. And the more you do it, and the more you get at what I call a hit, an accurate, then you get the positive feedback from your experience. And you learn, what does it feel like when you actually get an accurate perception versus something that was off the mark, or when it was both, like I just described. There's a feeling to it, and over time, over months, years of doing this, you get a very refined truthometer. Your truth meter in your heart and mind gets to where when you get something that's accurate, you can take it to the bank, right? Like when that master introduced me to my wife in the lucid dream state. And I went, okay, this is real. So we got married 43 years ago. A strange life. But it gets curiouser and curiouser. But so that's why when you do it over and over, but most people, Yogananda was so correct when he said, it's because of spiritual lassitude, and just not applying yourself, that most people don't develop these abilities, because it takes this mindfulness and focus. So you want to meditate every day, a couple times, 3 times a day. You want to practice this. You want to say, yes, I can do it. But then here's the next hardest step: acting on your perception, your intuition, because we're trained not to trust that. When in reality, even if you're taking the SATs, they say you should trust your first gut feeling. But this is something you have to learn to trust yourself, love yourself, affirm that you have this as an innate ability. And if you do, then it'll be advanced very quickly. You just have to have faith in yourself. I mean, it's a wonderful saying, as ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. But faith, not in just blind faith of catechisms, but this active, positive knowing is what I consider faith. And it's active, and it's positive. It's that positive energy. So as soon as you embrace that, then it unfolds in your life, on everything you're doing. Whereas negativity just stops that. So most people have to do that kind of work on their own attitude towards themselves. Having grown up abused, neglected, starving. I had pica, where I was eating cigarette ashes and sand, left wandering in the streets in traffic, 2 and 3 years of age, on and on and on and on. I sort of had to come to grips with, I'd take the control of my life at a very young age. But it was a lesson that then I had to believe I could. I had to believe I could. I was talking to Tony Robbins about this because he had a similar, a difficult childhood. And you just have to apply yourself. But the way you do it first is that you believe you can. And if you didn't believe you can, I would have perished, no doubt, when I was very young. So I think that's why, this is sort of a process of unfolding. But the beginning of it is having faith and belief in yourself in a positive way. Not in a grandiose way, but in a really genuine way, that we're all children, emanations of this great being, and it's all folded within us. And so these capabilities, they're not going to happen instantly, but they all are there ready to be unlocked and unfolded if we put our attention on it. The other wonderful saying is, that which you put your attention on grows most in your life. So if you put all your attention on YouTube or TikTok or divisive arguments about political parties, or that's what's going to grow most. But you can put your awareness, take some time to do this. Now, I remember people ask me, how do you work out 6 or 8 hours a week and run these projects? I said, because I'm not spending 6 hours a day looking at the idiot box. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's all time management, but what's important in your life? You know, the latest series of housewives in Poughkeepsie doing rubbish, or developing your consciousness and abilities in higher states of consciousness and making contact with ETs. This is a choice. That's why we all have free will. I can't make that choice for you. You have to make it, right? So this is where the responsibility, I like putting squarely back on your shoulders, because that's where it belongs. And all I can do is kind of give you the knowledge of how to maneuver this. Now, the last part of this is when you get this, begin to practice this, you're going to find that it'll be, and with meditation, it will just spontaneously start unfolding in dreams and day-to-day life. And because it's not, it's not like you have to stop, do something, and then you can see. It's just it's the way of the seer. It just becomes to be like that when you need to. And you don't always need to. I mean, most of the time you can just be cooking something and scrambling eggs or whatever. But when it's needed, it's there. Once you develop it, it's there. It's available, it's accessible. And so that's really beautiful. I know as an emergency doctor, I had some spectacularly crazy things happen like that, where various cities had to kick in, and I used them when I needed them. So I would see, like I had a patient who, it was flu season. He had all the symptoms of the flu: fever, chills, nausea, da-da-da-da-da. So the nurse put him in a medical room to be seen for the flu, and expectation, give him some amantadine or whatever and go home. I went in there and I felt, how dogs have been able to find cancers. I'm like a big dog. So I go in there, love dogs. I go in there and I sense, no, he's got a brain tumor. He didn't have any signs of it. He didn't have any focal, pupil, all the exam. But I followed my intuition. And I said, look, I just want to get a scan of your head, a brain, because I'm concerned about that it could be something more than just the flu. And so I tell the nurse, and she was awesome, Bubbles, and she had pigeon-toed like this with the bouffant, and she goes, well, Dr. Greer, it's just the flu. I go, just do it. That was my mantra, just do it. Now, luckily, I didn't have to go to a whole group of Nazis in the medical regulatory system as an emergency. I ordered it, they did it. No mas. Now all those people will be dead due to the regulatory state and the medical. The whole system is now run by business people, lawyers, and fascists. They forget the last thing is the doctor and the patient. That's like the bottom of the totem pole right there. Just, I'm sorry to say it, it is. It's got to be totally reformed. Nevertheless, I was able to get it, and so usually the radiologist is, you hear from them whenever, calls back emergently. Dr. Greer, this is a astrocytoma. It's a pancake. And it was like, what it was like, your skull was rigid. And there was this tumor right on the lining of the brain, on top of the brain. But it had gotten big enough that it was pushing the foramen magnum down through the midbrain. And so it was squeezing the chemotactic trigger zone, the CTZ, and all that causes, vomiting, temperature regulation. So it mimicked the flu precisely. But and those were the only symptoms he had. It wasn't affecting anything else. So I go, oh my God, so we have to get him emergently to neurosurgery, because when you start herniating your brainstem, if it hits the breathing and heart center, you're dead. You just stop, boom. So the neurosurgeon after all this calls me up and goes, how did you even think to get a CAT scan? Well, I couldn't say I went in there and remote viewed it, because I'd lose my medical license, right? So I said, well, I had a hunch. I just said, you have a hunch? I talked to a lot of doctors who've had experiences like this, and I think that at some point our educational system needs to incorporate all this knowledge. Where, kindergarten and before, people are learning about this and embracing it. It doesn't preclude science. there's something to add to the curriculum that's useful instead of all the other stuff. So that's how this becomes sort of like a way of life. So what I want to share with you, this technique, we're going to do a little exercise, but just think you can do this with your friends, with your CE5 group, with your family, or by yourself in these situations I've described. And as you do it more and more, you make it a way of life. I call it the way of the seer, the way of the empath, the way of the intuitive. And so, you know, it's like the difference between that and going to a workshop for a weekend and then forgetting it. That's the equivalent of going to bending a pious knee in church on Sunday and then, you know, being a monster the whole other 6 days of the week. So, which is what most people do. Yeah. So what this technique I'm going to teach now, we're going to do a breathing exercise, and then we're going to do a, we go to 6, right? This will be about 20 minutes. Is that okay? So it's about 6. We're going to do a breathing meditation. Then we're going to go into this state of non-local consciousness, this expanded state. And then I'm going to take you someplace. And it's going to be a target, a place to go and see. And tomorrow we'll do a different one. There are lots of ways of doing it. And as we do that, just know that you're not actually leaving to go anywhere, but you're affirming that the consciousness field whereby you're awake is actually there. It's there. You're there. You, this aspect of yourself that's awake, the pure awake form, is there. And so all you have to do is say, I'm going to acknowledge that, and then begin to feel it. Now, if you begin to sense it, feel it, just accept that. If you're struggling, here's the thing. If you find yourself guessing, intellectualizing, or forcing it, go back to the meditation and clear it. Hit the reset, right? You clear it, go back to a center state, and then go back to intending to see. Does this make sense? So it's this back and forth process where you get clarity. So I want to start this with ringing the Tibetan prayer ball. I love this sound. My wife gave this to me for an anniversary one year. And then I'll put it on the floor. After I ring this for a few minutes, I'm going to do this breathing meditation technique, and then we'll go on a little journey together. How's that? All right, so let's close our eyes. So as we sit here in silence, let us take some deep breaths in with our nose, out with our mouth. Deep as you can. And exhale completely. All the breath out. And with each inward breath, see the life force, prana, chi, entering your mind and your body, awakening, energizing. And as you exhale, release all of your concerns and limitations in the purifying breath of Mother Earth. And you are centered and calm, deep in pure, quiet mind. And we breathe in deeply, and we exhale fully. We become awake, and we become centered and calm, both together. And now let's watch the breath as we breathe normally, in and out. Who's watching the breath? How are we watching the breath? You are awake, and the awake mind is perceiving the breath. And yet that awakeness, that conscious mind, doesn't change. The perceptions change, but the consciousness is unchanging, unbounded, like a pure white screen that all of life is playing upon. And so we acknowledge the perceptions, hearing, sight, thoughts, breath, but we gently become aware of the consciousness whereby we are seeing the breath and seeing our own selves. How do we perceive ourselves in self-awareness? By virtue of this single light of consciousness. Now let us see that the consciousness whereby each of us are awake and our souls are illumined, that we are like beautiful windows in a great cathedral, and each one is unique, and they are illuminated by the same sun of reality. And so we can be aware of our unique and specific window, ourselves, but we can gently shift our awareness to the light of consciousness that is actually infinite, omnipresent, unbound by space and by time. And so as we do this, let us begin to sense the light of everyone in the room, the consciousness, and see that each person, like a snowflake, no two are alike. Each window into eternity is unique and beautiful, but the light of consciousness is one. And we feel now we are home in the origins of our being, this transcendent being, ourself. And so we can connect to that aspect and see that we can be connected to consciousness and perceive any place in time or space. And so effortlessly, as we see that we are now connected to this field of consciousness that is omnipresent, we expand our sense of it, and it fills the room. And wheresoever we bring our awareness, we see this consciousness in its fullness present. The same consciousness whereby we are each awake. Beautiful. And so effortlessly, we rise up above the hotel and see the desert to the east and the city to the west. And then we bring to our awareness Washington, D.C. And it is within our field of view, since this conscious field is everywhere. And we affirm that we can see with our inner sight whatsoever we intend. So as we go to Washington, we see the White House, and in front to the north, Lafayette Park, and precisely 1.0 miles to the north up 16th Street, the building where I have a condominium on the top floor, looking south at the monuments. And you can see the building. But then look to what's next door to the north. And there's another building. And so the condo building that I am in now is adjacent to, separated by an alley, to this other building, which we will now explore together. So look at it from the street, looking towards the east. You see the front and what the structure looks like. And then we go in the doors and we explore the interior. And then we go above it and look at what the top of the building looks like and the back. And we do this affirming that the conscious light whereby we're awake, being omnipresent, effortlessly, effortlessly can see this building. So let us meditate in silence. And we can do the mantra or the brief breath watching Zen technique, whichever you wish. And go into quiet consciousness, this infinite ocean of silent mind. And then acknowledging that the consciousness whereby you're awake is also in Washington. It is omnipresent. And so you allow the image or the knowledge. And if you begin to get information, whether it be a word, a design, a color, a shape, just make note of it and ask yourself if it feels accurate or not accurate. And if it feels like it is accurate, stay with a steady gaze in consciousness and let it unfold further and explore it as far as you can explore it. without straining. If at some point you find yourself distracted, or the mind wandering, or straining, or guessing, stop the process of remote viewing and just return back to quietly watching the breath and meditating and being centered in silent consciousness, and then return to the task. So I will be silent, and we'll do this together. And at the end, we will just share our impressions. Now, affirm to yourself that as people share their impressions with your eyes open, you can continue to connect to this field consciousness that's omnipresent and continue to remote view this building. And as people share, feel with your heart, your intuition, if it's accurate or not accurate, without judgment, knowing that this is an exercise to train ourselves to be a seer. And so let's open our eyes. Excuse me. And we don't have mics, but just if you have an impression, what time is it? Oh, we don't have our clock vanished here. Huh? So just, we have to end soon. Just throw out what you saw. One at a time, huh? Oh, that's what you saw here, but we were in Washington. So what did people see at this building? Huh? One at a time. A what? Okay. Other impressions, one at a time. Raise your hand. I'll just point to you. Yes, sir. Okay. Other impressions. Yes. One at a time. Yes. Interesting. Other impressions? The building, the structure. Yes, ma'am. Oh, is it raining there? I wasn't perceiving that. Yes. Okay. Other impressions? You gentlemen back there. Over here, yes. So continue to, I'm going to share what it is because we're running out of time. So my building, it's at 1701 16th Street, which is 1.0 miles to the White House. It's a early 20th century 8-story building because of the height restrictions in the district. So I can walk to the White House and I see the Washington. Now that is at 16th and R. The next street going north is S, right? Like the alphabet. And so that whole block are 2 buildings, my building and this building. That building is the 33rd degree Supreme Masonic Temple. It's in the Dan Brown novels. And so it's big columns, these huge doors. The top of it is a pyramid, like an Egyptian pyramid. There are sphinx-like things at the entrance, gigantic doors that are probably 15 feet big. And when you go in this grand hall, and there's a room for 𝗬𝗏 𝗰𝗁, because he was a 33rd degree Mason. And it has, of course, a huge organ, piano. It has all these rooms with various artifacts. There are moon rocks in there, actually. So I went there once, and it was open, and I thought, well, I'm going to go in there, because 𝗬𝗏 had passed away, 𝗬𝗏 𝗰𝗁, and the docent, it's only rarely open. And I said, well, I'm friends with 𝗬𝗏 𝗰𝗁, and she, the 𝗬𝗏, I said, yes. So she closes the place up and gives me a tour de force, the whole tour. It's really cool. So, it's next door to mine. I don't know. Look it up. I know my address, 1701 16th Street, Northwest. It's the next building to the north, so it would be 1730 or whatever. Interestingly, no, it'd be an odd number. But what's interesting is that the back of it has this big curved area, and behind it, on the grounds that did belong to the temple, they're building a new condo building or apartment building right now. So I don't know what aspects of this you saw. Inside, there are these grand spaces, an area with sort of a temple and altar, all these different rooms with artifacts. It's very, very interesting. So you may have gotten one aspect of it or another aspect of it, a purpose of it. What you want to do And the technique is you deconstruct it now. So you go, okay, I got this aspect, but then I added that, or I didn't get anything, I'll go back and try, or I got a very clear image, or I got the feeling of it, because it's the 33rd degree supreme Masonic temple, 1733. It's a huge structure. And you might have gotten its purpose. It's sort of this secret group. By the way, they don't know anything. Very few of them would know anything about this issue, but there are all these conspiracy theories. They're all wrong. But anyway, so that's what you want to do. You want to look at, try it, and then go back to what you were seeing and see what part of it did I get accurate, what didn't, what part did I start just making things up through my imagination. And it's a process of discovery, but also being really honest with yourself and very clear. And with that clarity and practice, you get more and more accurate. So each time you do this, as you begin to refine your perception, when you get something that's an accurate perception, you go, well, how did that feel? Well, how did that come to me? And you learn your own path. And the next time you get another accurate perception. And what did that feel? And so this becomes like it snowballs. The more you do it, the more it adds to your sense of how you're doing it that works, but what it feels like, so you have confidence when you get a remote image. Now, this is very important when we're out under the sky doing CE5 contact to be able to do this with great accuracy and develop it. But it grows over time. But that's just one technique. We'll do others tomorrow. All right? So we'll be back here at 8. Thank you very much. Have a good dinner and a good rest.